I'm not exactly what you'd call a diarist.
I had always thought of our friend as something of a philosopher.
Dear Lord, is that what you think? How long have you been coming down to Richmond now?
He always definitely has an ability to see the elements of how things work, to define and separate the necessary components of a device or an idea, to put them together again and, presto, to create something altogether new and unthought of. An extraordinary ability, I thought.
I can make notes, yes, of course I can, lists and workings, but it's always dry, it's hardly palatable to the less inquiring reader. And yet, suddenly, I have a desire to share my experiences with a broader audience, to get it off my chest, you understand. It's important, and that's where you come in, knowing what you now know.
He was more of an inventor, our friend, the traveller, able to anticipate an outcome, whilst the rest of us, we plodders, barely see past next Thursday.
So I must trust you to relate the events in your own literary style, but please, not too florid. I don't want to sound like some dreadful penny dreadful. Stick to the facts, that's all I ask. If you're prepared to take it on, of course. Thank you.
A practical philosopher, you might call him. Yes, that's more like it. The travelling came later, although that was most important of all. And on a matter of principle, by the way, I never saw anything wrong with a penny dreadful as such. But à chacun son goût, as they say.
Oh, I'm dry as dust, old chap. Stop hogging the brandy, for pity's sake.
Hold still then, Naylor.
That's more like it. Whoa, whoa. Thank you.
Heaton.
Philby, another.
Of course. Thank you.
Bertie.
Hardly started yet, thanks.
So, our host, as ever.
Yes, thank you all. Very kind.
So, every Thursday, out to Richmond with a small gathering of similarly minded fellows, the guests of our friend and host.
Excellent roast mutton as ever, Mrs. Wedgett.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, indeed, done to a turn. And the apple pie.
Shall I clear now, sir?
Yes, please, Mrs. W, thank you.
Oh, very good, sir.
So after the usual fulsome repast, out came the cigars, and our friend brought up his subject for the evening, geometry as taught in the classroom, and its limitations.
Geometry. Oh, law.
As you said, old chap, dry as dust.
But we had no conception as to where he might be leading the debate.
You see this cube?
We do.
Is this another trick like the ghost last Christmas?
Oh, yes. I still haven't worked that one out either.
Quiet, you two.
This cube is a three-dimensional square.
A cube is a square with depth, height, and thickness, well, obviously.
And duration.
Ah, yes.
The fourth dimension that school geometry so tacitly omits.
You mean time?
I do. It tends not to be noticed because our awareness moves in tandem with it and at the same velocity along the visible dimensional planes.
And when you examine it like that, time is an inseparable aspect of space.
Exactly.
So what about a photograph? Surely that's a captured moment.
A moment reduced to two measly dimensions.
Or is memory a dimension in its own right?
Yes, but that's narrowing the field. What I've been studying lately is the possibility of moving along the length of time, backwards and forwards.
Without tripping over your own bootlaces?
We travel through time at a steady rate in only one direction. But suppose we could travel at a faster speed. A day in an hour, a year in a day. For a while now, I've had the inkling of a machine.
To travel through time?
Exactly.
Oh, now there's a thought. You could jump back to verify the accounts in the history books. The Battle of Hastings, An eyewitness account. A true record.
Oh, yes, and you could take a camera. A portrait of Henry VIII. 6 portraits, one with each wife.
And then there's the future. One might invest all one's money and leave it to accumulate interest, and then hurry ahead to collect the bounty immediately.
Or discover a society built on a strictly communistic basis.
You'd get full marks for that.
All the wild, extravagant theories.
That's your opinion, Philby.
It is.
But I have experimental verification.
Now that I would like to see.
And you shall. Now stay there. I'll be back in a moment.
Sometimes he does talk the most fearful humbug.
Always entertaining, though. You have to grant him that.
Another sleight of hand trick, that's all.
Our friend returned almost at once. In his hand, he held a glittering metallic framework, scarcely larger than a small clock, and very delicately made. But then he has always been a meticulous craftsman. He set the object upon a small occasional table, and we gathered round to study it closely. There was ivory in it, and some transparent crystalline substance.
Well, it's beautifully made, whatever it is.
It's 2 years' work, the model for a machine that will travel through time.
Right.
You will notice that it looks singularly askew and that there's an odd twinkling appearance about this bar, as though it is in some way unreal. The saddle here represents the seat for the time traveler.
Where does he put his luggage?
And his camera.
And as for these little levers here, if I press the white one, it will send the machine gliding into the future, and this other brass lever will reverse the motion.
Well, with no wheel to steer it.
Philby, take no notice. He's being facetious.
Its travels are only linear, forward and back.
This is very intriguing, but...
Now, in a moment, I shall press the first lever, and off the machine will go. It will disappear, vanishing into future time. Now, have a good look at the thing, and look at the table, too.
Right.
To satisfy yourselves, there is no trickery. I don't want to waste this model and then be told I'm a quack.
All right. I see no trapdoors or hidden compartments. Perform your trick.
Well, go on then.
No, I think Philby should do the honors.
Oh, yes, good idea.
Very well, if it pleases you.
Just a light touch.
There.
I say.
Well, I'm damned. Vanished, just like that.
That's clever, but how did you...
No, it's under the table. It must be.
Please, go ahead. Look all you want.
No sign of it here.
It's up his sleeve.
There's nowhere near it.
It's up Philby's sleeve.
Hardly.
Over here. Am I warmer? Colder?
No.
It's a conjurer's illusion, like last year's ghost.
Well, of course it is. We all know that, but it's still jolly good fun.
All right, we give in. Where is it? What have you done with it?
No, not yet. Allow us at least one clue.
Not where, but when.
When? No, beyond me. Sorry.
Look here. Are you in earnest about this?
I most certainly am.
Do you seriously believe that your machine has traveled in time?
I am sure of it. Philby directed it into the future.
Gosh.
But whilst we are all traveling together in that direction, so to speak, your machine is traveling faster than us,
Thank you.
which explains why we cannot see it.
It's put on a bit of a spurt and jumped ahead.
Yes, that's right.
It's an intriguing theory, of course. We could theorize all night, but you can produce no factual or scientific proof for your claim.
Not yet, perhaps.
Then explain it. If it is no illusion, bring it back.
That is the one disadvantage. Without a pilot to operate the reverse lever.
You see?
No, all right. Perhaps I was hasty to show off the mechanism to you, but all is not lost.
I don't see how. It's gone. How can you get it back?
By waiting, of course.
Exactly. At last, someone gets the point.
The machine has traveled in time, but not in space. So all we do is sit tight.
Thank you.
But for how long? I mean, the last train is at 10 o'clock.
Can you determine the length of its journey into the future?
To next Thursday, perhaps?
Not yet. Not with the model.
Of course not.
Right, Philby.
But I do have a large version of the machine through there, nearly finished.
A fully sized machine.
And when it is complete, I mean to take a journey on my own account. Please, come through if you will.
Yeah, and don't forget the brandy.
Gentlemen, my time machine.
There, in his laboratory, amid a dance of flickering shadows, stood a larger edition of the little mechanism which had only just then vanished from before our eyes.
The deuce!
Parts were of nickel, parts of ivory, and parts had apparently been filed out of rock crystal.
Obviously, there are still some details to complete. These spiraled bars, for instance, need some refining.
What are they? Quartz?
When rotated at a sympathetic velocity, they refract the flow of time and create a path forward.
Amazing.
And you have conducted tests? Well, you must have.
No, this is all conjecture, and what we require is proof.
Philby, I assure you, upon that machine, I intend to explore time. Is that plain enough? Because I have never been more serious in my life.
And so, we were left to ponder that declaration for a full week until our next visit to Richmond.
Well, I'm still not sure what to believe. I mean to say, if Philby had said the same...
Philby.
Yes, he's such a skeptic, I might have believed him more. But our friend there, well, he's always been a bit of a romantic.
Is there ever progress without imagination?
Perhaps not.
And we did see the device vanish.
Exactly. Out it went like a snuffed candle. Now you see it, now you don't. But it had the whiff of an over-elaborate music hall act. I mean to say, just consider the possibilities of time travel. It's been nagging at me all week. The anachronisms it might cause.
Which, very possibly, we would never notice being part of them.
Well, it still stretches plausibility for me, and I intend to challenge him over it.
And so, we all assembled as usual, except that our host was nowhere to be seen.
He left a note with Mrs. Watchet, unavoidably detained.
You don't think he's avoiding us?
Now, why would he do that?
No, he says we should lead off with dinner if he isn't back.
Well, none of us will argue with that.
We started our meal, the mutton, the trimmings, all of which were always provided week upon week by our now absent host, who only asked for our company in return. And as we ate, we reviewed the events of the previous gathering. But it was wooden and awkward, and I doubt I was alone in wondering if perhaps this would be the last visit.
Good.
Good devil.
The juice.
And then, of a sudden, he was there in the doorway, hesitating as if dazzled by the light.
Heavens, old chap.
What's the matter?
He was in an amazing plight. His jacket was filthy and smeared with green down the sleeves, his hair disordered and greyer, it seemed. His face was pale, haggard and drawn as by intense suffering.
Come in, old chap. Sit down, sit down.
Yes. Here, a drink. You look as if you need it.
Yes.
How do you feel? What happened?
Have you eaten? There's plenty left.
Don't pester him. Give the poor fellow some air.
Thank you, my friends. I will be all right. Look, I need to wash and dress. Then I'll explain.
Quite.
He was limping. He had bare feet.
What has he been doing?
It's that time machine, you can be sure.
The machine? You mean he's actually...
I have no idea. Just pour me another drink.
It was some 20 minutes before our friend reappeared, more animated, dressed in evening clothes, but still decidedly haggard.
I could do with some mutton. I won't say a word until I get some peptone into my arteries. And some salt, thanks.
It's got a bit cold. Sorry.
Just some food.
One word, at least. Have you been time traveling?
Yes. Yes, I have.
He finished enough for two while we sat in silence, until at last he pushed away his plate.
I can't argue tonight. I'll tell the story of what happened, but I can't argue. And you must refrain from interruptions. I do want to tell you, and most of it will sound like lying, but it's true. Every word of it.
He gave me his account again later, when the others had departed homeward, and more of the detail had settled in his mind. And he allowed me to take notes, even ask the occasional question, for which I felt duly privileged.
I was in my laboratory at 4 o'clock that afternoon, and since then, between 4 and dinner time, I have lived out 8 days. Such days as no human being ever lived before. I have already told you the principles of my time machine, and you've seen it standing unfinished in the workshop. It's there now, if a little travel-worn. One of the ivory bars is cracked and a brass rail bent, but it is sound enough. I expected to finish the assembly the next day, but then I found that one of the nickel bars was exactly 1 inch too short, so it had to be remade. It wasn't until 10 o'clock the following Thursday that I gave the machine a last tap, tested all the screws again, and sat myself in the saddle. I imagine a suicide holding a pistol to his skull feels much the same wonder and fear, but I took the starting lever in one hand and the stopping one in the other, pressed the first and almost immediately the second. For a moment, everything reeled as if I were falling, but when I looked round, the laboratory seemed exactly as before. I thought my intellect had tricked me, and then I noticed the clock. A moment before, it had stood at just past 10 in the morning, but now it was nearly 4 in the afternoon. I drew breath, set my teeth, gripped the starting lever with both hands, and went off with a thud. The laboratory went hazy. I saw Mrs. Watchett come in, speeding across the room like a rocket, apparently without seeing me. So instinctively, I pressed the lever over to its extreme position. The room grew fainter and fainter. The night snapped in like a lamp turning out, and moments later, it was day again. Then night came back, then day, night, day, faster and faster. Weeks, then years went by in a minute. It settled on my mind like a trance, flickering like the beating wings of a black crow, and that sputtering of darkness and light was painful to my eyes. After a while, the dim walls of the laboratory seemed to fall away. I was out in the open air, and I guessed the house had been destroyed. The sun was racing, and in the flickering night times I saw the moon growing through her quarters from new to full and back again, with the circling stars beyond. The hands on the dials that counted my speed in years were spinning faster and faster. The night and day blurred into an endless grayness, and the sky turned a deep crepuscular blue. Oh yes, with the sun as a single arch of fire, and the moon like a much paler, fluctuating ribbon, both crossing the great circular canopy of twilight. The landscape went misty and vague under the hurtling seasons, and on the hillside where this house had stood, trees grew and changed like puffs of vapor. Huge, distant buildings rose and passed like dreams. The whole surface of the earth seemed to be melting and flowing. More buildings, great architecture, appeared and then vanished again under a flood of green. It was relentless, hard to breathe. The machine swayed like a sort of sickly madness. It was too swift to take in. Even the dials were too fast to read. And at last, my mind turned to thoughts of stopping. But suppose I was no longer on solid ground. I was a ghost, slipping like vapor through newborn substances. I might be encased in solid rock. Did I dare to stop at all? The fact was that the absolute strangeness of everything and the feeling of endless falling had upset my nerves. I told myself that I might never stop, that I would go careering on beyond all dimensions into oblivion. And that was when, in a gust of petulance, I resolved to end my journey. I lugged back the lever, and the whole machine lurched and keeled over, and I was flung headlong through the air.
I think you need another drink, old chap. I'm exhausted, so heaven knows how you feel.
I'm remembering more this time, but I must continue before I forget again. I'm not going too fast for you.
No, no. We'll continue then. Your journey was over. Violently so. But were you insensible for long?
I was only stunned for a moment. The rain was hissing down around me, but thank heavens the confusion in my ears was gone. I was lying flat out on what looked like a small lawn, all surrounded by rhododendron bushes. And my time machine had overturned. The rain was bouncing off it in a cloud. Heaven knows what damage was done. And I was already soaked to the skin. That's fine hospitality for a man who has traveled innumerable years to see you, I thought. So, I stood up, tried to wipe off the mud, and looked around. Looming over the bushes, even the smaller trees, was a colossal figure on a pedestal, carved in white stone.
Probably marble or alabaster, and you thought it was a sphinx.
Except that her wings weren't vertical. They were spread wide as if she were hovering. Her whole shape was old and worn. The pedestal she sat upon was bronze and thick with verdigris.
Intriguing how this was the work of an already ancient civilization that, from our point of view, hasn't even been born yet. How far into the future had you traveled?
I didn't say, did I? You see how easily things slip away. Of course, I didn't know the date at once, but I'll get to it. The rain was clearing, just a shower, and the air soon warmed up in the sun. But I was fixed by the Sphinx's sightless eyes. What were the people like who had carved her? Cruel or kind? And what would they see me as? Some old-world savage to be caught and slain? I suddenly felt very, well, naked in a strange world. I didn't belong. I had to leave. I went back to my overturned machine and grappled hard to right it. Up it came in one piece, so I started to check the instruments for damage. And that was when I noticed the dials. According to their position, I had traveled to the year 802,701 AD.
Good grief. That's not far off
1 million years, yes, I know. Well, nearly. A different age or epoch.
Scarcely comprehensible, isn't it?
I was eager to depart, believe me. And then I heard voices, half singing, I thought, from beyond the bushes. Hello? Hello? Do you understand me? They were slight creatures, half a dozen of them, maybe 4 feet high, with curly hair and pale skin. They wore loose purple tunics with leather belts and sandals. They were fragile looking, but beautiful too. Androgynous, like figures from some classical painting of Arcadia. It was only later that I learned they called themselves the Eloi. I am a friend. Yes? A friend? Yes. Yes, thank you. How do you do? No, please don't pull my clothes. These are mine. Mine, yes? Finest Scottish wool, I believe. No, that is my machine. My carriage. Please don't touch. Careful, please. I came here on it from... Oh, Lord. From far away. Yes, far away. No, not exactly right, but it's not easy to explain. Back there. A long way ago. Oh, no, that's not what I meant. Not from the sun. Over there. Over the hills. And far away.
Away.
Oh, flowers. Oh, well, that's lovely. That's very kind. Very honoured. Yes. Thank you. No, careful. I've already said. Please don't. That's my machine. Right, I'll just take these levers out. There. Thank you. We don't want any mishaps, do we? Ouch! All right. No need to push. Where are we going?
How foolish were they, do you think?
No, not foolish. Innocent, perhaps. The Eloi may have sounded like infants, but they certainly had a language of sorts, even if it seemed restricted. I began to think that either they had yet to learn the diversity of their own tongue, or they had forgotten.
If they were so simple, perhaps they didn't need it.
Or it was more subtle than it sounded. After all, the clothes they wore were not rags. So they led me away from the lawn and the watching Sphinx, and you know, I'd always imagined a future of grave and intellectual prosperity. Well, wishful thinking, you might say, but in these people's company, I was overwhelmed instead by a sense of irresistible merriment. They led me through the flowery woodland, up a wide avenue, towards an edifice of great size that crested the hill. Its archway was richly decorated, rather Phoenician in style, but weather-worn and cracked.
Well, I suppose that all empires rise and fall.
Inside, there was a wide hall, dilapidated too, with high windows of stained glass that were mostly broken, and there were long curtains, thick with dust. The floor was laid out with flags of white metal. There were stone tables as well, with at least a couple of hundred Eloi people seated around them on cushions. Of course, they all turned to stare at this drab and soaked-through stranger. Good evening. But answer came there none. Their clothes were simple, but bright and gaudy, and it made me feel distinctly dingy in my 19th century garments.
No proper introductions either. Most irregular.
Oh, that was the thing. I probably bowed a bit, I can't remember, but after a few moments, they lost interest and went back to eating the fruit, mostly strange stuff that was piled on the tables. And since no one seemed bothered, I joined them. There was a sort of delicious raspberry and orange hybrid in particular. And fluffy white beans in a long green-brown pod. They had a lovely, soft texture, a bit like ice cream.
Inga edulis.
Really?
Sounds like it anyway. It's a tree from the Amazon, but it would never grow here. Not in our current climate. Not tropical enough. I probably won't put that in the book, you know. Too much detail.
Things had changed, you see. And fruit, by the by, was the sole diet there. Those gentle people were strict vegetarians.
No roast mutton. Great heavens, what would Mrs. Watchet say?
Oh, yes, I did miss that. But for the duration, I became a frugivore, if that's the word.
Absolutely. Frugivorous.
And some of the flowers, too. Florivorous? Sounds about right.
I can always check.
I did try to pick up a few names. This is very good. But what do you call it?
What the fun?
After I'd eaten my fill and been largely ignored, because my hosts, not unlike children, had a serious capacity for losing interest after a few moments, I decided that I should at least try to get my bearings, and so I stepped outside again. I stood on the steps, drinking in the warm glow of the setting sun. It was calm there, a tangible calmness. The landscape that I knew from long ago had changed. The Thames down in the valley had shifted, perhaps by a mile, and the houses and cottages that seemed so English were long gone. In the distance, emerging from the greenery, were the scattered roofs of palace-like buildings in which I assumed other people now lived.
Communism, then?
Yeah, I thought you might say that.
But occurring naturally, without political determination. You could almost call it tribal.
A short way down the slope was a pretty little structure, like a well under a cupola. It seemed odd to see something practical here, like a well, particularly in such a position. It was more ornamental, I supposed. As the sky was washed with crimson, I couldn't help thinking that I was seeing a civilization in decline. A gentle decline. Perhaps the sunset of humanity itself. Had I missed its climax, the pinnacle towards which we as a society are striving? Yet the world seemed a garden. It was idyllic. There were no boundaries, no apparent agriculture or industry, and the food was abundant. The Eloi appeared content, free of worry and disease, even, dare I venture, perfect in their simplicity. I must have stood for a while, because when I put my thoughts down, the sun had gone, and in the other direction, the full moon was already up. I looked down into the valley and saw the white sphinx shimmering in the silver light. And beyond it was the lawn where I had left my time machine. But the dark space was empty now. The machine had gone. No! I started down the hill, running like the blazes, and just the thought of the loss was enough to choke me. I was wrong. I had to be. I tripped and fell headlong, but I pulled myself up again. As I ran, I felt a trickle of blood wetting my face, but I stumbled on, terrified of what I might find. When I reached the lawn, it was as bad as I feared. Where is it? Where is it? Not a trace of the machine was to be seen. I ran to and fro, terrified, searching in vain, while that blasted sphinx sneered down in mockery from its pedestal. Damnation! Where's my machine?
Steady, old chap. This is distressing you, I can tell.
I'm all right. Absolutely fine. I'm fine.
Well, take a drink at least.
You see, it all comes back to relive it. That sudden revelation of being stranded away from home.
Yes, here. Drink this.
Shipwrecked, marooned on the sea of time. Thank you. Yes. No, I'll be fine now.
You're sure?
Yes. I tried consoling myself that the Eloi might have put my time machine in some shelter for me, but that was hardly likely, given their physical and intellectual inadequacy. What dismayed me most was a suspicion that some hitherto unexpected power had removed my invention. I was sure the machine could not have moved in time. I had detached the levers and still kept them in my pocket. No, the machine had been willfully moved and hidden. I was certain of it. Where is it? I suppose I had a kind of frenzy, lashing in a rage at the bushes around the Sphinx until my knuckles were gashed and bleeding from the broken twigs. I even startled some white animal that, in the dim light, I took for a small deer. Then, sobbing and raving, I headed back to the great building of stone. The big hall was dark and empty. I stumbled on the uneven floor and fell against one of the stone tables.
Damn! Oh, my shin! Ow!
I can't see a thing. Where are you all? Well, where is it? What have you done with it? My machine. Have you seen it? Where is it? Where have you taken it? My time machine.
Time machine?
What?
Time machine? Time machine? Time machine?
Stop it! Stop it!
Machine?
I couldn't stand it. I stumbled out into the night and down the hill, back to the lawn. I felt hopelessly cut off from my own kind, a strange animal in an unknown world. I must have raved to and fro, looking in one impossible place after another, groping among moonlit ruins and touching strange creatures in the black shadows. I was probably delirious. And finally, a terrible, aching fatigue came over me. I lay on the ground near the Sphinx, weeping in absolute misery because that's all I had left. And then I slept, flat out, unconscious. And when I woke again, it was full day. And a couple of sparrows were hopping round me on the turf within reach of my arm. No fear, you see.
And it all felt better by daylight.
It did. Things became clear.
Your emotions were also exhausted.
Yes, maybe. And I could certainly see the folly of my frenzy overnight, and I could reason with myself again. Even if my machine is lost or destroyed, I have to stay calm and patient. I have to. And I must try to learn these people's ways, yes, and their language to find a way to get materials and tools so that in the end, perhaps, I may make another machine. What other hope do I have? Well, it's better than despair. And after all, it is a beautiful and curious world. So, where to start? Oh, no, hang on, though. These are tracks. I didn't see those before, not in the dark. There was a long groove ripped in the turf and queer, narrow footprints all around. They led towards the bronze pedestal of the Sphinx. I'd thought it was a mere block, but no, it was highly decorated with deep-framed panels on either side. So I circled round, rapping at them. And it was hollow. There were no handles or keyholes, but I was sure that the panels were doors which would open inwards. One thing was clear enough. My time machine was inside that pedestal. But how it got there was a different problem. Hey! Hey there! Any idea what's in here? Well, what's the matter? I can't get in, you see, and there's something of mine inside. Someone's in there. Hey! No, don't run. What are you scared of? What's in here? Anyone inside? I know you're there. I stood back, exasperated. My hands were green with verdigris from the panels. And then the irony of this situation struck me. I had spent years of study and toil to travel into this future age, and now all I could think of was trying to get out of it again. Oh, you fool. I had devised the most complicated and hopeless trap ever, and got caught in it myself. Although it was at my own expense, I could not help myself. I laughed out loud, and I started to draw a crowd.
Yes, that's right. Come and see the madman. Come on. Tuppence a time.
No, of course not. Why would you want to see me? You won't remember, not for long. You'll soon forget. Well, that I could be so lucky. But that was the problem. The Eloi could no more understand me than I could them. So I had to try to understand better because, sure as fate, they wouldn't make the effort.
Their language, as it was, did it have no recognizable words?
Well, not really. More than anything, it was like baby talk, half-formed.
Or half-forgotten? No figurative language, then?
They could mimic. They plainly found aping me hilarious. But the rest was almost instinctive, communicated by emotion. I don't think they needed anything else. Their lives were so contented and undemanding.
So the last thing their minds were was inquiring.
The world was a playground. As far as I could guess, everywhere displayed the same exuberant richness. From every hill I climbed, I saw the abundance of splendid buildings, the same blossom-laden trees and tree ferns. It stretched away forever, the blue hills fading into the serenity of the sky. So I put the mystery of my time machine and the bronze doors in a corner of my memory until my accumulated knowledge could lead me back to them with confidence. That was not easy. It was difficult to let go of the past until I found more for myself in this unknown future. So you'll understand that I never strayed more than a few miles from the point of my arrival. One peculiar feature, everywhere I went, was the presence of those circular wellheads. All of them were rimmed with bronze and capped by an ornate cupola to hold off the rain. Sitting on the edge of one, peering down into the dark, I couldn't see a gleam of water. It seemed very deep indeed, and from each well I visited, I thought I could hear a deep thud, 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 like the beating of some big engine, and I discovered, from the flaring of my match, that a steady current of air was streaming down the shafts. So what was down there? Was it part of a sanitary or drainage system? Or an abandoned train system like the Metropolitan Railway in London? Yet the Eloi, young, beautiful, no one old at all, were innocent of railway companies or social movements or telephone and telegraph wires or smoking factories or even postal orders. And they coped very well in their reduced circumstances. One might almost call them lucky. Nowhere on the surface had I seen a sign of machinery. Yet the little people wore colorful woven fabrics, simple perhaps, but not rags by any means, and their sandals carried tricky pieces of metalwork. Such things need making and renewing, but the little people displayed no vestige of a creative tendency. Back here, in our own time, we stand on the brink of a machine age, with more and more functions and tasks being automated, things to come. But would such industry be outgrown and cast away again? The Eloi spend all day playing gently, bathing in the river, making love in a half-playful fashion, or eating and sleeping. It was beyond me how things were kept going. Unless there was another world down below, down in the dark. It set me thinking. I dropped a second match into the depths. And for a moment, I'm sure the guttering flame was reflected back in what might have been a pair of staring eyes. I didn't sleep well that night. Every noise disturbed me. I lay in the dark in a corner of the great hall, and when I did drift off, I dreamed that I was drowned. I was lying on the bottom of the ocean while sea anemones felt over my face with their soft palps. What? What's that? Who's there? It was that dim grey hour when things are just creeping out of darkness, when everything is colorless and clear-cut and yet unreal. But I was sure something had been there beside me. I got up and left the hall, out onto the flagstones in front of the palace. The air was chilly, and I'd had a bad dream. But you know the ghastly half-light before the dawn, when the shapes are still inky black? Well, down the hill, I thought I saw ghosts, white figures. I glimpsed a solitary, pale, ape-like creature darting quickly through the bushes, and further down, a brace of them carrying some dark body. But they soon vanished among the shadows. Yet how could these apparitions be ghosts? Even if you believed in such things, you only have to think about the practicalities. If the ghost of every dead person returned to wander the world, they would be shoulder to shoulder by now. No room for the living. So what had I seen? Or what had I missed? That same day, I made a friend, of a sort. Some of the little people were bathing in the shallows when one of them, it was one of the young women, was apparently seized with cramp in her leg and began drifting downstream.
Hang on, she's in trouble. Your friend, can't you see? Well, don't just stand there, for pity's sake.
All right. It's all right. Hold on to me. Hold on. No, don't struggle. I've got you. Hold tight. Right. You're safe now. You're safe. It's shallow here. Come on then, out of the water. There. Sit quietly. Try to get your breath. There. What is it, your leg?
Leg.
That's cramp. Hold your leg out. Like this. That's it. And stretch your toes up. There. There. We'll soon get the circulation going. There we are. There. Better? Yes?
Better.
I have no idea if you understand, but if that's better, that's good. Now, take care of yourself.
Better.
Right. Cheerio. At least I had the satisfaction of seeing she was all right before I left her. Knowing her kind, I hardly expected any gratitude from her. In that, however, I was wrong.
You didn't mention her before when the others were here.
Well, keep it simple, I thought. You know what they're like. Joshing and everything, and Philby picking over the details.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Which suggests to me that you saw her again.
Yes. Yes, I did.
And did you seek her out?
Not exactly, no. She came looking for me, which I confess was a surprise.
A pleasing one.
Yes. The first friendly face, someone to talk to, or talk at any rate. Suddenly I was not such an outcast.
So perhaps she saved you as well.
Oh, no. But I couldn't have left her to drown.
She reciprocated in all her innocence.
You, sir, are as bad as Philby. It wasn't like that at all. After I'd left her by the river, I went on my daily round of exploration, surveying the land. But on my return, suddenly there she was, coming up the path to meet me.
Better.
Oh, what's this? Oh, flowers. For me?
Better.
Well, thank you. I never expected... I mean... Well, I am delighted that you are safe.
Better.
Ah, is that what you call me? Better.
You say it on me. I think for you understand, but I
Yes. And what about you?
Better.
No, what are you called? I am better.
Better.
And you are... You?
Uwina.
Uwina. Well, that's very pretty.
Uwina. Better.
Better and Uwina. And this garland is lovely. Did you make it? Yes, of course you did. Thank you again, though I think There. It looks much better on you. Better again.
I made for you and not for me. For me.
Thank you, Uwina. There is much I want you to teach me, and I hope to prove a good pupil. Her innocence was hugely endearing, especially in my desolate state, and I did my best to display my appreciation. Her devotion affected me like a child's might have done. We passed each other flowers, and she kissed my hands. So I did the same to hers. Then we tried talking, though I had no idea what it meant, but it seemed appropriate enough. And after that, she followed me everywhere like a child or a puppy. Yes, Suina, over here. But on my journeys of exploration, that could become cumbersome. If I left her behind, she would plead for me to wait. I understood her plight, of course, but the problems of the world had to be mastered. The last thing I'd come into the future for was to carry on a miniature flirtation. Even so, she was a great comfort to me, my little woman. On occasion, I did leave her behind, but I always looked for her doll-like figure as soon as I returned, and she always seemed downright ecstatic to see me.
Better, back soon.
Yes, back soon. Yes, I wasn't long, was I? And she'd even started to pick up a few of my words. It felt like coming home.
Dinner time. Yes?
Yes, yes. Very good. The one thing I should have learned quicker was that despite her fearlessness in the daylight, she dreaded the darkness, as did all her people.
The dark.
No, Awena, not with the others. Stay with me.
No, better. Dark.
It's all right. I'm here.
No.
Stay here. You're quite safe.
Stay here? Oh.
So she slept, with her head resting on my arm. That fear of the night explained why the Eloi gathered into the great houses after dark and slept in droves. They never ventured out after sunset. Yet, despite Uwena's distress, I insisted on sleeping away from the slumbering multitudes. And for that, I was a total blockhead.
Do I detect a degree of regret there?
Oh, indeed, yes. I think she was too devoted. It's difficult to say that she knew no better.
Ah, that word again.
You know me by now. I try to perceive everything with a scientific eye. I believe everything has a rational explanation.
Well, of course.
I need another drink. I'll call Mrs. Watchett for some tea.
It's late. She's probably gone home to Mr. Watchett by now.
How comforting for her. Well, another brandy then. That'll probably help. Thank you, Bertie. You're a very good listener, you know. I'm sure I picked the right man.
Oh, that's very kind. So, remind me of the creatures you had seen, the ghosts in the night. Isn't it time they put in another appearance?
Yes. Yet another case needing rational clarification. I was coming to them. I was aware that our sun was much fiercer in those future days. One very hot noontime, I was out alone again, having left Awena picking fruit for our dinner. But I soon had to seek shelter from the heat and glare, and I came upon a colossal ruin that I had not visited before. I clambered among the heaps of masonry and found a narrow gallery whose end and windows were blocked by fallen masses of stone. Compared to the dazzle outside, it seemed agreeably cool, so I groped inside, trying to accustom myself to the blackness. Suddenly I halted, spellbound. A pair of eyes, catching the reflection of the crack of daylight, was watching me out of the darkness. The old instinctive dread of wild beasts gripped me. I stared steadfastly back into the glaring eyeballs. I was afraid to turn. I remembered Uwena's strange terror of the dark.
Who are you? Where are you from?
The weird, ape-like figure blundered against a block of granite. It staggered aside, and in a moment was hidden in a black shadow beneath another pile of ruined masonry, but I was after as quick as I could. I'd seen a dull, white simian with large, grayish-red eyes, and there was flaxen hair on its head and down its back. It moved fast through the shadows, too fast for me to see at a distance. But it held its forearms low, almost running on all fours, and then it vanished. I thought I'd lost the brute in the gloom until I came upon one of those round, well-like openings that scattered the landscape. And I heard movement down there. I lit a match and saw below me a small, grey creature with big, bright eyes that regarded me steadfastly as it clambered down the wall. It made me shudder. It was like a human spider. And then I noticed the metal foot and handrests that formed a ladder down the shaft.
Ow! Damn!
The light burned my fingers and went out, and by the time I'd lit another, the monster had disappeared. I can't say how long I sat peering down that well. I was trying to define the thing I had seen. Surely it wasn't human too. And gradually, the truth dawned on me. Suppose man had not remained as one species. Suppose, perhaps, that following the propositions of Charles Darwin, mankind had differentiated, evolved into two distinct animals. That my graceful children of the upper world were not our sole descendants. Perhaps this bleached, obscene, nocturnal thing which had flashed before me was also an heir to our world.
Two races from one.
I think so. Judging from the number of deep wells set across the landscape, the underground creatures must have tunneled everywhere.
And what did you call them before? Morlocks?
That was the name the Eloi had for them, one of the few solid words I could make out. They must have feared them so.
I was thinking of an explanation as to how this evolutionary split occurred.
It took me a while, but once I had a solution, it seemed clear as daylight. Its roots lay in the gradual widening of the problems of our own age. The social difference between the capitalist and the laborer. That is key to the whole position.
And then it's a good thing Philby and the others are not here.
I hope you're not going to be offended. It is, after all, a wildly incredible theory.
No, not at all. I have been considering this too, and I'd go further. There has been a tendency to utilize underground space for the less ornamental purposes of civilization. We already have new electric railways and subways, underground workrooms and factories, and they increase and multiply. In short, this tendency has increased till industry has gradually lost its birthright in the sky. Even now, the East End worker lives in such artificial conditions as to be practically cut off from the natural surface of the earth.
Exactly my thought, whilst the richer, more highly educated people inhabit the open and airy spaces, driving the workers who service them below.
The haves and the have-nots. You see how it all begins. But there has been a shift of power there too. As the upper world grows more dependent on the engine room below, so the workers, your pale Morlocks, must have adapted to their new, dark world. They grew stronger.
They rebelled and began to prey on the effete, sunlit Eloi, descendants of their former masters. I'd seen them already. Those ghost-like figures on the hillside were Morlocks, carrying an Eloi into the night.
Two separate worlds within one. But what was their purpose in that abduction?
That will become all too apparent. Thank you, Bertie. I've had these thoughts, but no one to discuss them with. You know, I feared I'd gone mad. I had so many doubts, questions that I had to set before Owena. Owena, listen to me.
I want to know if
No,
you are
not
bored.
fruit. Listen, please.
Better listen.
About the world below, the tunnels, the dark world.
Darkness.
Yes, do you know it? Down there, have you seen? Have any of you? No. Maybe you don't understand. The world down there, in the dark.
Oh, Morlocks.
Is that what you call them? So you do understand?
Darkness. Morlocks.
Owena, they took my machine. You know, my machine. They stole it, and I have to get it back. Go down into the dark if I must.
No, better. No darkness. No Morlocks.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's too much, isn't it? I'm sorry. Don't cry, little one. I'm a fool. Better is a fool. Come on. Look at this. Owena, look. Look. It's a flame.
A flame. A flame.
Meanwhile, I foresaw another problem. The moon was reaching its last quarter, and the nights were darker, which might encourage the Morlocks out further. Despite Owena's constant companionship, I was so horribly alone. A desperate insecurity drove me to consider venturing into the dark world below. Little Owena ran with me, dancing beside me until we reached one of the wells. Owena, listen to me. You must wait here, understand?
Peter?
I must go down here.
No, no, darkness, Morlocks.
Yes, I understand. That's why you must stay.
No.
But I have to go.
No, Morlocks.
I'll come back, I promise. Goodbye, little Owena.
No.
I climbed over the parapet, feeling for the climbing hooks. Rather hastily, I confess, for fear of my courage leaking away. She stayed gazing down at me as I descended, her little silhouette still visible against the receding blue circle of sky. Down I went, down and down, step after groping step into the dark, until finally, with relief, I made out a slender loophole in the wall and swung myself through. My arms ached, my back ached, and the dark strained my eyes. I don't know how long I lay there, but I was roused as a damp hand fingered my face.
Wait, what's that?
3 pale, ape-like creatures with bulbous eyes cowered away, ducking into the gutters and tunnels. I edged forward, endeavoring to make the match last. Not many left. And presently, the walls fell away. I stood in a large open space, a vast arched cavern stretching into utter darkness, a factory floor. The shapes of mountainous machines rose out of the dimness, casting grotesque black shadows in which spectral Morlocks sheltered from my match's glare. The air was stuffy with a faint smell, like freshly shed blood. Across the central vista stood a table of white metal on which sat a red, raw joint of meat. The Morlocks were meat-eaters. It was all indistinct, the heavy smell, the vile figures lurking in the shadows, waiting for the dark and a chance to come at me again. And then I saw the bloody joint clearly. It was slender and hairless, the shape of a young human leg. The match stung my fingers and went out. Get away from me. Don't touch me. In the dark, their soft fingers came all over, touching my face, my clothes. Don't! Matches. Nauseating, inhuman, with pale, chinless faces and huge, lidless, pink-grey eyes. But I did not stay to look. I ran. And when my match guttered, I struck another. It had almost burned through when I reached the opening into the shaft. The throb of those machines had made me giddy, but I felt sideways for the projecting rungs, and as I did so, my feet were grasped from behind and tugged backwards. But I had my hand on the rungs now, and kicking violently, I pulled out of the Morlock's clutches and clambered up the shaft. Only one wretch followed me, but I gave him my boot in his ugly face as a trophy. That climb seemed endless to me, and with the last 20 feet of it, a deadly nausea came upon me. I could barely hang on. Several times my head swam, and I thought I would fall. And then a hand reached down to me. I almost struggled again, but then another gripped me, and I was lifted from the hellish well mouth and fell on my face in the blinding sunlight.
Victor! Victor! Oh!
Oh, Rowena. Oh, it's you. Oh, Rowena, thank you. Thank you. And you brought your friends. Yes, I'm back now. I'm home again.
Home.
Yes.
Victor and Rowena. Home. No more dark. No more.
I found some cheese in the pantry and a biscuit tin.
Good old Mrs. Watchett. She always has supplies somewhere.
I found some pickle, too. Cheese is nothing without a relish.
Thank you, my friend. Ever since I returned, my appetite has been unappeasable.
Well, it was noted that you had lost some weight. That'll be the fruit diet, I suspect.
Very probably.
Shall I slice the cheese?
If you would, thank you.
You see, what intrigues me about the Morlocks...
Yes?
Oh, look, perhaps we should continue later. You need some rest.
No, please. I've started now. It would be foolish to lose the momentum. So, about the Morlocks.
I shudder just at the thought of them. But what surprised me was that they had intelligence.
Oh, yes.
I dismissed them, you see, as degenerate monsters, scavengers even. But they had machines.
Basic machines.
That's more than your docile Eloy had. The Morlocks plainly had skills and brain power. The upper world people might once have been the favored aristocracy, and the Morlocks their menial servants. But that had long since passed away.
With respect, Bertie, you didn't see them. They were, or will be, repulsive, dark-dwelling leeches, animal-like in every respect.
With no pigment in their skin. Yet, as you inferred, the Morlocks made garments for the Eloy. They maintained them in their habitual needs, perhaps through the survival of some old habit of service.
They were albino apes. And they took the guileless, gentle Eloy as food, which, if you consider my proposal, that humanity is the single ancestor of both races, amounts to nothing less than filthy, disgusting cannibalism.
But it follows through. Food in the depths must be sparse, worms, rats, and such like vermin. If the Morlocks' humanity had gone, what else would you expect from them?
To them, the Eloy are nothing but fatted cattle.
Here. Do you still want your cheese and biscuits?
I've lost my appetite.
I'm sorry.
Let's continue. I had mentioned my fears over the coming dark nights. The old moon was on the wane, which meant a longer stretch of darkness each night. I now shared the Eloy people's fear of the dark, and I wondered what foul villainy the Morlocks might commit under the new moon. Even that they might come looking for the stranger who dared pierce their underworld realm. One hope consoled me, that the upper world people might have begun to learn one old lesson anew. They were rediscovering how not to acquiesce. Owena, I was thinking...
To walking more?
Yes, that's very perceptive.
I would like go too. のだと飲みてえのそみ。
Yes, all right. You want to come with me, of course. Of course you can. I'd like the company. I thought of traveling southeast towards what used to be called Wimbledon. You see across there?
で
To those pinnacles above the trees, like towers of green porcelain. I wanted to take a look. We can follow the Thames, the river. Now it's shifted south.
Yes. South? The river. That way.
Yes. Come on, then. We have all day. I had considered this before, walking along the river, I mean. I thought that if I followed what had once been the Thames, I might eventually discover the remnants of London's once mighty metropolis. Had all the old streets and buildings and bridges and docks been wiped away? I know that there are ruined cities like that in the Orient, overgrown by the jungle. Well, I was no archaeologist, but I might still find clues or fragments.
This way. Better.
I hadn't forgotten my time machine, of course, nor the need to retrieve it from those brutes down below. I had vague ideas over how to achieve that. I needed an immediate safe place of refuge, and then to make myself arms of metal or stone to defend us. I also needed to find some means of fire. My matches were all spent, but a torch to fend off the Morlocks was imperative. And I was going to break open the doors under the White Sphinx. I thought of a battering ram. I was sure the time machine was inside. I could not imagine the Morlocks were strong enough to move it far away, and once I'd found it, I would escape. Owena, I'm going to take you away from this terrible place. How would you like that?
Walking?
No, by machine. My machine. It'll take us a long way away from here, somewhere safe for both of us, yes? Safe.
Your famous is better, but who said the Swiss things?
Meanwhile, I thought we needed to find a house, a home.
Home. Yes.
Or better still, a palace. A palace of green porcelain. That's where we're going now, to look over the property.
You were settling in,
I doubt it. My roots were firmly elsewhere.
but this palace, was it really green porcelain? How decadent the future must have been. Not really your style at all, I would have thought.
Sorry to disappoint your socialistic nature.
Not at all.
It took us 2 days to reach the place, much further than I anticipated, so I ended up carrying Owena on my shoulders.
I love it here. I love it here.
You like that, don't you? You were never so high. Not long now. Hold tight. But then a nail in my shoe began working loose, making me lame. Ow! Damnation. Which slowed us down a bit. Owena, sweetheart, we'll have to sleep out tonight. But don't worry, I'll be here. I'll keep you safe. As the hush of evening crept over the world, we reached the hill crest overlooking Wimbledon. It seemed a good place to stop, with the dark woods spreading below us. Owena put her arms around my neck, pressing her face tight against my shoulder.
Better.
I wrapped her in my jacket to keep her warm, and while she slept, I watched the stars. The Milky Way seemed still the same tattered streamer of stardust as of yore, like an old friend, and somehow that dwarfed the gravities of earthly life. I thought of the stars' unfathomable distance and the slow, inevitable drift of the unknown past into the unknown future. Yet the memory of mankind as I knew it had been swept out of existence. I tried to preserve myself from the horror that crept upon me. Man had lived in ease and delight upon the labors of his fellow man, with necessity as his watchword and excuse. But in time, necessity had come home to take its revenge. The great fear between the Eloi and the Morlocks was the punishment for human selfishness. I looked at little Weena sleeping beside me, her face white and star-like, like one of the flowers she endlessly pressed into my pockets, and I knew I must save her from the monsters below. Overhead, I picked out one new bright red star that was even more splendid than our own green dog star Sirius. But beyond the trees, the old moon was rising, one last thin crescent before the nights turned dark, with only the stars to bear witness to the horrors to come. Dawn whitened the sky at last, and I found a new confidence that made my fear seem perverse. We had seen no sign of our enemies in the night, but my foot was swollen at the ankle and painful, so I took off my shoes and flung them away. It was noon before we approached the Palace of Green Porcelain, but the pain in my ankle was already easing. The palace stood on high ground, overlooking a large estuary where I guessed Wandsworth and Battersea must once have been. But like everything else, the vast building was in ruins. Careful of the glass, Rowena. You see? Sharp. Come on, come inside.
Yeah, sure. It's dark here. Be careful.
It'll be fine. Come on, come and see. Well, what a place. Even in ruins, it looks like a museum. It could be a latter-day South Kensington. Yes, dust. Everywhere, I know. All right, I apologize. Oh, look at this. You see these bones, Rowena? All broken, but this was a giant sloth, surely, a great beast, a megatherium. And look at the length of this creature, a brontosaurus or I'm a duffer. It's very, very old, before even man walked the world. Well, that confirms the museum theory. We must be in the paleontology section.
Oh, no! Achoo! Achoo!
Look, more fossils. Oh, God, I'm sorry, it's my fault, but they're sealed into their cases, too. Airtight. So most are fair condition. Owena, this place is an ancient monument to an intellectual age. There could be artifacts of great use to me, materials I can use, or books, a library. I don't suppose you understand this sign, do you? No idea? No, nor me. It's barely legible anyway, not in any language or script I can recognize. Still, we'd better start exploring. Stay close. Don't wander off. We passed through a gallery devoted to natural history, in which the specimens were mostly shriveled or mummified, and a second dedicated to minerals. The sight of a block of sulfur set my mind running to gunpowder, but I could find no saltpeter, indeed no nitrates of any kind. Doubtless they had all deliquesced ages before. Owena.
Better?
These are machines. Instruments and engines from your past, but my future. It runs right down there, too. Oh, yes, just up my street. There must be something useful in here. Now, let's see. They're badly corroded. No, this is no good. I can't see properly, either. They must have had artificial lighting in here.
Better?
What's this one for? Conveyors and piping?
Better?
Weena?
Dark.
Down there, you mean?
Morlock.
Yes. Something down there. Like a rat in the wainscot.
Walking. Come.
Yes. God, I've no weapon.
Better. Come. Better.
This'll do. This lever. If I can just... done it. Really good swing at a Morlock skull. That's all I ask.
Take away better. Come take away better.
Go on, Owena. Go. Back in the light. Get back, you! Get back! Back!
It Oh, we let go.
It's all right.
We cannot
It's
stay.
all right, sweetheart. It's gone now. Owena, we're safe in the light. Listen, it won't follow us. Not yet.
No. Doc, soon.
No, not yet. Not for a while. Now, I know you're scared, but we must keep looking. I have to find weapons.
The clock has stopped.
It needs winding on a daily basis. Must have slipped my mind. That's time machines for you.
It's nearly 4 o'clock by my hunter.
Do you want to turn in?
No, not unless you do.
No, not now. I don't want to lose my thread. Let's keep going, if you're sure.
Yes. Fine, old chap. Although, I might just have another biscuit.
With my mace in one hand and Owena in the other, I entered into another, even larger gallery. But it was full of light there. At first glance, I thought it was a military chapel hung with tattered flags. But looking closer, I saw that the brown and charred rags hanging from the walls were the decayed vestiges of books that had long since dropped to pieces. It was a library once, and all that knowledge is lost. There must be something somewhere. We have to find something. Up a broad staircase we went, into a gallery of technical chemistry. And here, at last, I made a useful discovery. Owena, look! These cases contain ancient relics, but from nearer my own time, the world I come from. There are weapons here, look! Swords and guns and pistols. Oh, but these are rusty. They'd need powder and cartridges. Oh, now wait. These are everyday objects. Yes, flints, a tinderbox. Owena. There.
Oh.
A box of matches. A box of matches. Real matches. Lucifers. And the airtight seal means that maybe... Oh, come on. It works! God in heaven, it works! They're good! Not even damp! After all this time! Dance, Owena, dance with me! It's a miracle! We should be dancing! Oh, you take the high road and... No. High world, yes. Did I tell you I'm an inventor? Oh, we'll take the high world and ne'er take the dark world and be back in my world of for me and my true love will soon be back again on the bonny, bonny banks of the Thames. No rhyme at all, but the matches work. They work, by God. We've got some light at last. I'm sorry. I shouldn't... I mean to say, my mind hadn't turned.
Of course not, old chap.
It was just a moment. I don't know. It probably scared Owena, though.
It's understandable. Don't worry. I can leave that out if you want me to.
Yes. That clock needs winding.
It's 4:30.
Yes. No, I'll do it later. And there was a camphor, too.
Camphor?
I didn't say, did I? In the same glass case, in a jar, hermetically sealed. I couldn't read the label, and I thought it was paraffin wax at first. But when I smelt it...
Unmistakable.
It was a sort of eureka moment. In all this universal decay... This volatile substance had survived right across hundreds, perhaps thousands of centuries.
Extraordinary luck.
And I was very grateful. So I wrote Owena's name, and mine too, in the dust, on the nose of a steatite idol from South America that took my fancy.
For posterity.
I just felt like it. Owena. There. Your name.
Owena. Uaquino Oda, a we ida. You pay attention. Mane appeal and twisa. Pamapa come Oda, for opopis. Go to wa, look, a inhale la pulit.
We found a little open courtyard, warm, with cracked flagstones and trees laden with fruit in need of picking.
Bonnie, Banks.
Bonnie. Bonnie Banks.
Bonnie.
Sunset would be soon, and we still had to find a hiding place before dark set in. But I had a weapon now. Fire. The best defense against those creatures. It's cloudy. No stars. We should go as far as possible tonight. Away from here. I mean to reach the White Sphinx tomorrow, so I may have to carry you again.
Bonnie.
And we'll need brushwood, too. We'll need a fire tonight. That should keep us safe. Come on, Awena. At least you got some sleep last night. Just a fox, that's all.
No, better. Molochs.
Oh, God, you're right. 3 of them. And another, there, crouched in the long grass. It's all right, don't panic. There's plenty of brushwood here. If I can set a blaze going, that'll see them off. No, Awena, come on now, I'll protect you. Look, I've got the camphor. It's just one piece to begin with. But don't you touch her, you filth! Come on. Light, damn you. Come on! There. Now the camphor. That's it. Now into the wood. Come on. There. It's taking. No. Don't touch. It's hot. It burns. Ow. Never touch that. You understand? Now hold hands. Up the hill while we can. Come on. Up you come. Nearly there.
I couldn't go. Better go.
We have to, sweetheart. Come on. I'll carry you. Hold on to me.
Better.
What?
Better.
Fire. It's spreading up the hill. We have to go in then. Into the wood.
No. Doc.
There's no other way. You'll be fine. Just hold on tight. Somehow there was enough light to see us through the trees. The fewer of my precious matches I used, the better. Awena was hardly heavy anyway, and I still had my iron bar. For a while, all I heard were the crackling of twigs underfoot and Awena's heartbeat as she pressed herself against me. But she didn't speak. She still clung on, trusting in me. I'm sorry. I heard a pattering close by, but I pushed on grimly. As the footsteps grew more distinct, I caught the same queer sound and voices I had heard in the underworld. They were Morlocks, of course, several of them closing in on us, very close. I felt a sudden tug at my coat, and something touched my arm. Get away! I couldn't put the matches off any longer. Sweetheart, I'm going to stop. I have to put you down, but I'm right here. Don't worry. Down you go. I lowered her down, and I fumbled for the box. But soft little hands came creeping over my coat and back, touching even my neck. Off they scrambled, but not as far this time. They were getting used to the sudden flares. I pulled a lump of camphor from my pocket, ready to light it as soon as the lucifer paled. Awena, get ready. Get ready to run. But she was lying motionless, her face to the ground, clutching my feet. She seemed to have fainted. I lit the camphor and flung it to the ground. It split and flared, driving the Morlocks back into the shadows. But the wood was filled with the stir and murmur of a great company approaching. Up you come, Awena, dearest. Up you come. That's it. Right.
Which way? I don't know the way anymore. I've lost it. I've lost the path. I had to think fast. I could build a fire to stave them off till morning, but that was my only hope. My first lump of burning camphor was waning already, so I laid Awina down, still unconscious, against a turfy bowl and began collecting sticks and leaves. And all around, in the darkness, the Morlock's eyes shone like carbuncles. The camphor flickered and went out. I lit a fresh match and saw two of the white apes approaching Awina. Caught in the light, they panicked. One of the brutes, running blindly, came straight at me. I felt his chinless jaw crunch against my metal rod. I lit a second piece of camphor and threw it on the gathered twigs. More wood! I need more kindling! At least it's dry. Hasn't rained for a week. But I have to keep it going all night. And there are hours of darkness yet. Awina? Awina, my darling, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should never have brought you with me. But we will get away. And I'll take you back to my home. Back to England, where you'll be safe. Where there are no horrors like this. And every night, my darling, we'll go dancing. I promise you. I felt the heat of the fire and the smell of the smoke and the camphor, and sat exhausted, my back to a tree, for just a moment. Get off me! Get away! Ah! It was dark. I had slept. My fire had long since died, and the Morlocks had their hands on me. No! I struggled for the matchbox, but it had gone. They came over me in a wave. I was caught by the neck, by the hair, by the arms, and pulled down. In the darkness, all those soft creatures were heaping upon me. Little teeth were nipping at my neck. I was caught in a monstrous spider's web. My hand flailed out, desperate for a weapon, and found the iron rod. Come on, then! Who's first? You're not taking Awina or me. If you want us, you'll have to pay for your meat. Awina? Awina? Awina, where are you? Where is she? Awina! What have you done with her? Even in my rage, I saw that they had only fallen back a little. They were massing to overwhelm me again, and I no longer cared. For a moment we stood and stared, my enemies and I. Behind them, the darkness seemed to grow luminous. I could see my enemies more clearly, their bulbous eyes and simian faces eager for my death. But the air itself was turning red. I saw others running in a growing stream. As I stood agape, a little red spark came drifting across a gap of starlight between the branches. At that moment, I understood the smell of burning wood, the slumberous murmur that was growing into a gusty roar, the red glow, and the Morlock's flight. The wood was ablaze. Awina! Awina! The whole space was as bright as day in the fire. An arm of burning forest encircled the place like a fence of flames, with yellow tongues leaping up, ready to burn the sky. There were some 30 or 40 Morlocks on the hillside, dazzled by the light and heat, running hither and thither, blundering against each other in bewilderment. I saw several rushing in terror straight into the inferno. In the searing light, it was they who were blind.
Oh, my dear chap, I had no idea. I must express my deepest sympathy.
I sat on the hill's summit watching the incredible spectacle. There was a coiling uprush of smoke streaming across the stars like a tattered red canopy. 2 or 3 Morlocks came blundering at me, but I drove them off again with my rod.
But Your poor Uwina. What happened to her?
I bit myself and screamed, desperate to wake up, praying it was all a nightmare. I stood up and sat down again and beat the ground with my hands. When the white light of day finally emerged, I ventured down the hill and limped across the smoking ash, searching for her between the blackened tree stumps. But she was gone. Though whether she had fled or been carried off, I could not tell. I thought to start a massacre of those helpless abominations. But why should I? Why should I put them out of their misery? The hillock had become a kind of island in the burnt forest. From the top, through the grey haze, I could see the palace of green porcelain, and from that I got my bearings for the White Sphinx and the hiding place of my time machine. It was slow going heading back. I was exhausted, as well as lame, and I felt an intense wretchedness for the loss of little Uwina.
What can I say? If there's any way I can help... Oh, these are ham-fisted platitudes, I know, but, well, it will pass. Eventually. These things do.
No, I won't let it.
You'll be scarred, of course you will. But you're home now, my friend, among your familiar things. It's far away. One day, believe me, it will seem like a bad dream. You'll find other things.
That morning left me absolutely alone again. Terribly alone. I thought of this house and my fireside and all of you. But those thoughts only brought a longing that was painful to endure.
Of course.
And then I made a discovery. It was Providence, I suppose. But in my trouser pocket, there were some loose matches. The box must have spilled them out before it was stolen. And that spurred a fresh determination in me. I tore up bunches of grass and tied them round my bare feet. And I started to hobble back. About 9 the next morning, I labored back up the hill to the palace, the point from where I had first viewed the world on the evening of my arrival. It was the same beautiful scene. The beautiful people moved across it like dreamers, the same abundant foliage, the same magnificent ruins, and down in the valley ran the same silver river. Some were bathing in exactly the spot where I had saved Uwina. But like blots on the landscape, there were the cupolas, marking the dark ways down to the underworld. I knew now how the beauty of the overworld hid the seething rat's nest below. Very pleasant was the Eloy's day, as pleasant as the day of the cattle in the field. For like cattle, they knew no enemies and provided against no needs. And their end was the same. I grieved at how brief the dream of the human intellect had been. The triumphs of civilization, learning and discovery, art and music, all lost. It had set itself steadfastly towards comfort and ease, richness and intellect above, machinery and hard graft below, taken for granted with little reward. And so mankind was divided, and its spirit had committed suicide. The feeding of the underworld became, over time, disjointed. And when other meat failed its industrious denizens at last, they turned to that old habit hitherto forbidden, and fed on the cattle above. In spite of my grief, and after the excitement and terror of the past days, the tranquil view and the warm sunlight were very pleasant, but I was exhausted. So I spread myself out upon the turf and fell at once into a long, deep, dreamless sleep. I awoke, much refreshed, a little before sunset. I now felt safe against being caught napping by the Morlocks, and stretching myself, I set off down the hill towards the White Sphinx. I had my crowbar in one hand, whilst the other played with the matches in my pocket. I had made elaborate preparations for the siege of the statue and the danger I must face. The silvered crescent of the new moon hung in the sky as I reached the lawn. And there was the blank-eyed Sphinx, looking down on me with its usual sardonic, superior smile. But now came a most unexpected thing. As I approached the pedestal, I found that the bronze panels were open. Good Lord. They had slid down into inlaid grooves, and inside, on a raised place, sat my time machine. So here, after all my plans, was the meekest surrender. I had the small levers in my pocket. I only had to fit them in place and depart. No, it's too easy. Be careful. For once, at least, I grasped the mental operations of the Morlocks. It's a trap, it must be. But I stepped through the bronze frame anyway, and up to my long-lost time machine. Ah, my friend. What have they been doing? This has been cleaned and oiled. Have they been pulling it apart? No, nothing missing. Not as far as I can see. Unless... it is a machine. And maybe the Morlocks revere that. Even worship it. What's that? Damnation, the panels! They were rising, sealing me in. I'd been wrong. Despite all my assumptions, it was a trap after all. I climbed onto the saddle and began to slot in the first of the levers. Back! Get back! I have fire here! Come no closer! I pulled a loose match from my pocket and struck it on the rough side of my machine. No! Damn it! I had overlooked one little thing. The matches were of that abominable kind that light only on their box. By the little light still seeping in, I saw the Morlock gang part to let a bulkier figure through. A silverback, rearing up from his stooping gait on his hind legs. He slapped his chest and faced me, man to man. His message was clear. This is our world. We are the rulers, and you, whatever you are nothing. As he made his speech, I edged the second lever towards its place. Get away from me! His brutish little minions were close upon me, one hand and then another, fingers groping, trying to drag me away. The reverse lever would not slot in. In desperation, I pushed at the forward-going lever. Instantly, their clinging hands slipped away. That feeling of nauseous falling lurched upon me, and at last I was traveling through time again. After a moment, the dark interior of the pedestal vanished. The same grey light and tumult of my journey passed before me, but I was still traveling further into futurity.
Into the future again.
I had no choice. I couldn't end there, not torn to shreds by those animals. Better the future than a grisly end in the darkness.
I shudder to think. But at least you escaped.
As you see.
So, where to? How far did you go?
For an indefinite time, I clung to my machine as it swayed and shuddered, quite unheeding of its progress. I might have been unconscious or delirious, who knows? When I regained my senses and brought myself to look at the dials, I was amazed to find out how far I'd traveled. One dial records days, another thousands of days, another millions, and the last hundreds of millions. I had pushed the lever forward so far that the thousands hand was sweeping round as fast as the second hand of a watch. As I drove on, the palpitating greyness around me grew darker. Then, although I was still travelling with prodigious velocity, the blinking succession of day and night became apparent again, growing slower and slower, and so did the passage of the sun across the sky. It puzzled me very much at first. A steady twilight brooded over the earth, a twilight only broken now and then when a comet glared across the sky. The sun had ceased to set. It simply rose and fell in the west and grew broader and redder, and there was no trace of the moon at all. The circling of the stars grew slower, turning again to creeping points of light. Eventually, although I was still traveling, the bloated red sun guttered like an ember in a dying fire, in danger of snuffing out altogether. It seemed the Earth had come to rest with one face to the sun, just as in our own time the moon faces the Earth. Very cautiously, I pulled back on the forward lever. The dials slowed, and the mist around me resolved itself into the dim outlines of a desolate beach. I stayed on the saddle. The sky was no longer blue. Northeastward, it was inky black, studded with pale white stars, none of which I recognized. The huge red hull of the sun sat motionless above the horizon, but there was little warmth from it. The air was thin and cold. I shivered and found myself struggling to take each breath. My machine was standing on a sloping beach. The rocks were green, slimy green, with that sort of lichen one finds in caves, those plants that grow in a perpetual twilight. Not a breath of wind was stirring, and there was a smell like the rotting seaweed you find washed up on the shoreline. There were no breakers on the sea, only a slight, oily swell, rising and falling like the breathing of a giant. Along the desolate slope, I caught movement. Something was crawling, feeling its way with limbs at all angles across the rocks, like a rough-skinned, tailless lizard. Every so often, it stretched its neck to fasten its mouth on a rock, apparently sucking nutrient from the slime. It moved closer, but failed to notice me. Perhaps its eyesight was limited. Something akin to a huge white butterfly with canvassy wings launched into the air close by. The creature must have startled it, and it went slanting up the sky, circling and disappearing over the low hillocks beyond. I turned back and met the slithering creature's gaze. Its round head cocked to one side as it studied me. Its spindly fingers flexed over the rocks, and I caught in its tiny eyes a vestige of curiosity, a lingering trace of its ancestry. Behind it, a red rock moved and reared up, a monstrous crab-like creature. Can you imagine a crab as large as a dining table, with its many legs moving slowly and its big claws swaying? Its long feelers waving like carter's whips.
No! Look out!
Startled by my call, the little slime eater turned and scuttled away, straight into the maw of the advancing crab.
No!
I stared, unable not to see, guilt-ridden at nature's cruelty. I felt a sudden tickling on my cheek as though a fly had lighted there. I brushed it away with my hand, but in a moment it returned, and almost at once there was another by my ear. I snatched at it and caught something thread-like. It pulled back out of my hand.
Oh, dear God!
It was the feeler of another monster crab, right behind me, evil eyes wriggling on stalks, mouth all alive with appetite. And its vast, ungainly claws were descending upon me. I threw my hand on the lever and immediately placed a month between myself and the brute. But I was still on the same beach, in the same somber light, and now there were swarms of the crabs, scuttling here and there among the sheets of slimy green. A sense of abominable desolation hung over the world. The red and black sky, the Dead Sea and its foul, slow-stirring monsters. I shuddered and jumped on 100 years more. Yet little had changed. The world was loathsome and sluggish. But rising in the westward sky, I saw a curved, pale line like a vast new moon. So I traveled, stopping ever and again, on and on.
You were running, weren't you?
I was not.
From the horrors you had witnessed, and from the loss of Owena.
I had an expedition to make.
Oh, come along. At any time, you could have slotted in the second lever and reversed your journey, like a return ticket on the train from Waterloo.
It was the fascination. I had to know where the world was going.
Do you think people will believe you?
How would I know? Do you?
You are very persuasive in your narrative. Frankly, you hardly need me at all.
It is not an elaborate fantasy, if that's what you think, or an opium-induced dream.
People will wonder.
What do they know of how their lives will go, how their world will end?
You have talked all night, my friend. And soon Mrs. Watchett will be here to make up the fires and cook your breakfast.
Coal from the mines, food from the farms.
And we must count ourselves lucky. We live in blessed times. Mankind has not divided yet.
You don't believe me, do you? You doubt my sanity.
I know that men returning from the wars frequently suffer from a disturbed disposition. What you have endured, and I have no reason to doubt you, has been distressing in extremis.
They all think I'm mad. Naylor, Pollock, Heaton and Philby, especially Philby. And who can blame them? Perhaps you should go now.
I hope everything you have told me is true.
It is true.
But if you wish me to go, then...
I never found her. On the hillside. I looked and looked.
Owena, you mean?
Suppose she was there. I could have missed her. She could have hidden herself. There was so much smoke and chaos. I've worked out the dates. The 13th of May in the year 802,701 AD.
My friend...
She could still be there. Think about it. Waiting for me. Alone. So scared.
I have faith, my friend. Complete faith in you.
I have dark moments.
Of course.
The clock needs winding. Mrs. Watcher won't be long now. Don't go. I didn't mean it. You must stay for breakfast.
I should like that. Thank you. But in the meantime, you must tell me, how far onwards did you travel? How much further into the future?
You're right, of course. The mystery of the Earth's ultimate fate drew me on. I had to know. I drove my machine on in strides of 1,000 years or more, and at each step the red sun grew larger and duller in the sky, and the life of the old Earth ebbed away. The crawling multitude of crabs had gone, and the red beach seemed lifeless. It was bitterly cold. The stars in the sky were fiercely bright, but barely seemed to twinkle at all. Rare white flakes came eddying down, and along the sea margin there were fringes of ice. Further out, a shallow sandbank had appeared, and I saw some black shape flopping about upon it, the red light catching on its glossy skin. Then it went quiet. Even the sea seemed to stop its slow undulation. From the circle of the sun, a black bite had been taken, and it grew larger. A shadow crept over the day. An eclipse was beginning. Was it the moon or the transit of some new interloping planet passing close to the Earth? Who knows? As the darkness thickened, the eddying flakes grew more abundant, and the cold of the air more intense. One after the other, the white peaks of the distant hills vanished as the dark ate the sun and the earth. Only the stars remained. The cold of this terrible night cut me to the marrow. Every breath was painful. I clung to my machine, dreading the return journey. And then, like a red bow in the sky, came the return of the cold sun. Something was moving, emerging from the glutinous sea. It was a globular thing the size of a football, maybe bigger, black against the weltering blood-red water. Boneless tentacles writhed out from it as it slithered fitfully about. After millions of years of evolution, was this all that was left? I was weary. I felt I was fainting. But a worse dread of lying helpless in this remote, awful twilight sustained me. From this moment on our Earth, I knew there was no future left. I took the other lever, the return lever, from my pocket and fixed it in place at last.
Oh, is that the time? Oh, I'm sorry the breakfast was late, sir.
No, it's all right, Mrs. Watchett. We were tinkering with the clock and may have set the minutes wrong. It is only 9:15.
Oh, well, that's a relief then. But I still don't know where the day all goes to. Can I fetch you more toast, sir?
More toast, old chap?
What? Oh, no. That was quite sufficient, Mrs. W. Thank you.
Very good, sir.
So, you came home at last.
Across the dance of time, like a phantom watching the world grow young again. In amongst the ghosts of houses at last, our decadent houses, until the dials turned back to zero, give or take a couple of hours. But not quite exactly. My machine re-emerged at the opposite end of the laboratory.
Due to the distance that the Morlocks had dragged it into the pedestal.
And there, on the table by the door, was the latest copy of the Pall Mall Gazette, with the day's date upon it.
Carrying one of my own contributions, I'm embarrassed to say.
And here you all were, making merry in the dining room as if I'd never been gone. And in I came. The Wanderer returned.
And that dropped a few jaws, I should say.
I should have bathed first, I apologize.
Hardly the point, old chap.
I thank you for listening, Bertie, but I cannot expect you to believe it.
Oh, come along now.
Take it as a lie instead, or a prophecy. Say I dreamed it in the workshop. Consider that I have been speculating upon the destinies of our human race until I have hatched this fiction. You can treat my insistence of its truth as a mere stroke of art to enhance its interest. I hope it sells for you.
If it sells, then you will receive an reimbursement too. I have already spoken with Mr. Richardson, my publisher.
Really? Money, let alone scientific recognition, even literary appreciation, is far from my thoughts now. But if there's anything else I can tell you...
Well, I had wondered if perhaps...
You want to see my machine? Yes, of course. Come through then. Why not? You know everything else. There it is. My time machine.
And it has changed position, as you said.
And damaged a chair on its return.
So, the pedestal of the White Sphinx will one day stand here.
I would move it back, but, well, it's heavy. Turning it upright was one thing, but dragging it...
It was not completed the last time I saw it.
No, it runs well. Though the saddle could be more comfortable.
And the two levers, forward and reverse?
Quite safe, thank you. I never leave them in place now. It's too risky. There's one rail just here that's bent awry, probably due to the Morlock's attentions. And some scratches on the ivory.
And down here? Some dried grass and moss on the base, where they dragged it, I suppose. Relics from the future. Extraordinary. You know it would help to examine the workings sometime.
Let me show you these.
Dried flowers. Are these the ones that Uwina gave you?
Careful. Please, be careful.
Yes, of course. Sorry. Not unlike hibiscus, though. From the Malvaceae family.
She wound me a garland of them. She was always laughing.
And these? These must be the matches you discovered.
The last few without their box.
Incredible.
If that helps with the verisimilitude of your writing.
Oh, yes. And these? Magnesium powder. With a camera. And a carpet bag. Good Lord. Surely you're not planning another expedition. Not yet.
Who can that be?
Is this advisable? So soon? Please, my friend, you really must reconsider, if only for your own well-being.
It is not your concern.
Excuse me, sir. The gentlemen, the Thursday gentlemen, are here.
What? Philby and Naylor and the rest all together? Did you send for them?
No, of course not. Look, I'll go and head them off. I'll tell them to come back later.
On Thursday, where they belong, damn it! My time is my own.
Bertie, you're here already.
Good morning, gentlemen.
You had the same idea as us, I take it.
We sent a message to say you should join us.
Is this a deputation? Because this is not a convenient time.
Is he here?
He is.
He's not ill, is he? I said he might be.
Because we want words with him.
We most certainly do.
And what do you propose to say? Because if I were you, I'd be very careful.
He's not really ill, is he?
Or just in hiding.
It is all a gaudy lie.
Now, just a minute, Philby.
A hoax.
Brilliantly, intricately done, though.
You'd fall for anything, but we saw through it.
You seemed most receptive last night, after the generosity of the dinner that our host always supplies.
Traveling through time. How absurd. The stuff of deluded fantasy. We felt we should confront him.
Your opinion is noted, sir.
Oh, sorry, Bertie, he didn't mean you.
But we positively adored it. So elaborate a wheeze.
First rate, almost had us convinced.
Never knew he had a sense of humour. I dread to think how much that contraption cost.
So we came down to congratulate him.
We would have been here earlier, but the train time's awful.
So where is the wag?
The laboratory.
Where is he?
Hiding again, old fellow. We're onto your game.
Oh, sir. What happened?
I say, the skylight's blown in.
Ow! Mind the glass.
Where are you, my friend? We know you're here.
No. The time machine.
The bally machine.
He's taken it. He's gone. Will he ever return? One can only wonder. It may be that he has swept back into the past and fallen among the blood-drinking, hairy savages of the age of unpolished stone, or among the grotesque, saurian brutes of Jurassic times. He may even now, if I may use the phrase, be wandering on some plesiosaurus-haunted coral reef, or beside the lonely saline lakes of the Triassic age. Or did he go forward into one of the nearer ages, where mankind is still mankind, with the riddles of our own time and its wearisome problems solved? Or has he returned to the far-flung, smoking forest in search of his beloved Owena? Our friend, the time traveler, saw in the rise of civilization a foolish heaping that would inevitably collapse and destroy its makers. But to me, the future is still blank, a vast, uncharted ignorance. Our friend saw only the few moments that make up his own story. I keep by me now on the desk 2 strange little flowers, shriveled and brown and flat, to witness that even when mind and strength have gone, gratitude and a mutual tenderness will still live on in the hearts of man. And from that I take comfort. At the risk of disappointing Richardson, my publisher, I stayed on, waiting for the time traveler, waiting for a second, perhaps even stranger story, and the specimens and photographs he would bring with it. But I am beginning now to fear that I must wait a lifetime. The time traveler vanished 3 years ago, and as everyone knows, he has never returned.
My name is Ben Miles, and I play the part of the time traveller in H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. I find the story fascinating. I was also interested by how it could be rendered through the medium of radio, and I found that it fires one's imagination even just reading it. I think it'll be very exciting to hear.
He was more of an inventor, our friend, the traveller, able to anticipate an outcome, whilst the rest of us, we plodders, barely see past next Thursday.
So I must trust you to relate the events in your own literary style, but please, not too florid. I don't want to sound like some dreadful Penny Dreadful. Stick to the facts, that's all I ask. If you're prepared to take it on, of course. He's obviously very intelligent, but a bit of a maverick, and tolerant of only a very few people, it seems. And they only seem to be those people that either serve him, like Mrs. Watchett, or that are interested in him, like Wells in the story. So you could argue he's quite a Narcissus, but he's a deeply intelligent, driven individual. It's sort of a Victorian Doctor Who figure in a way, you know. He's a man obsessed, and you either follow him or you fall by the wayside.
I'm Nicholas Rowe, and I'm playing H.G. Wells.
Okay, everybody, over to you.
Exactly! At last, someone gets the point.
The machine has travelled in time, but not in space. So all we do is sit tight.
Thank you.
But for how long? I mean, the last train is at 10 o'clock.
Can you determine the length of its journey into the future?
To next Thursday, perhaps?
Not yet. Not with the model.
Of course not.
But I do have a large version of the machine through there, nearly finished.
A fully sized machine.
And when it is complete, I mean to take a journey on my own account. Please, come through, if you will.
And don't forget the brandy.
I'm happy to move on, if everybody's happy to move on.
Capital.
Very well done all.
Out of all the friends that go around to hear the time traveller's story, he's the one who's the most credulous in some respects, but that's because I think he has a greater understanding of science and maybe a greater inquisitiveness and belief that it's possible, belief in the impossible. And so he comes across as an enthusiast. He struggles to believe, he wants to believe, and I think that makes him the most engaging character.
I am Christopher Naylor, and I am playing the character of Naylor. Now you see it, now you don't. But it had the whiff of an over-elaborate music hall act. I mean to say, just consider the possibilities of time travel. It's been nagging at me all week. The anachronisms it might cause.
Which, very possibly, we would never notice being part of them.
Well, it still stretches plausibility for me, and I intend to challenge him over it. Naylor is one of a group of very well-to-do and very comfortable gentlemen gathering and having lunch and talking about science. That sort of upper-middle-class intellectual circle who clearly also enjoy indulging themselves in the good things about life. It's tremendously good fun to play, and it reminds me of some Hammer films. There's a very good Hammer Dracula film called Taste the Blood of Dracula, where these rather dissolute gentlemen gather and have rather more sordid gatherings, but it is that sort of Victorian upper-class circle, so it's tremendously good fun to play. It's very relaxed and sort of bantering. So yes, it's a good group of actors' scenes. I think we're all bouncing off each other, actually.
My name is James Joyce, and I'm playing Mr. Pollock. My character is one of the group that meet to discuss idea. They're a sort of a scientific group, I guess, a sort of group of intellectuals, although my character isn't that bright. I think he probably enjoys meeting up and having a drink and a chat, and enjoys listening to other people. Whether he fully understands it all is another matter. He's not the sharpest tool in the box.
My name's Howell Morgan, and I play the leader of the Morlocks.
A silverback, rearing up from his stooping gait on his hind legs. He slapped his chest and faced me, man to man.
Be now, Morgan. But Mrs. Agarunila Morlock. Me now all.
His message was clear. This is our world. We are the rulers, and you, whatever you are nothing.
They are the industrial underclass, I suppose. And so I was trying to search for something vocally that would suggest working people, and that they were ape-like, and he describes them as being without any skin pigmentation because they've been underground for so long. But they're also cannibals, and whereas the surface dwellers, the Eloi, are fruit eaters, I imagine them as having beautifully sun-kissed complexions and fantastically lithe bodies. I think the Morlocks are carnivorous and muscular and visceral, and so we were trying to find something that suggested their incredible physical strength and their brute carnivorousness, whilst at the same time having a lack of massive communicative thought. So we kind of came up with this deep, low, guttural, salivating sound. It involves a lot of slurps and doesn't really emanate from the front part of the mouth at all, which is where we tend to articulate as humans. It's all very back low in the mouth. So I suppose it's kind of it's Elephant Man meets Alien.
I am Angela McIntosh, and I play Mrs. Watchet and Uwina.
Oh, is that the time? Oh, I'm sorry the breakfast was late, sir.
No, it's all right, Mrs. Watchet. We were tinkering with the clock and may have set the minutes wrong. It is only 9:15.
Oh, well, that's a relief then. But I still don't know where the day all goes to.
Because it was sticking with the book and they have their own language which isn't quite formed, I went through quite a few little techniques how I might approach that. Because the words, the line's there that she needs to say, so it's just saying it, so it almost sounds like she's saying something but not quite understanding it.
It took us 2 days to reach the place, much further than I anticipated, so I ended up carrying Owena on my shoulders.
Oh! Oh, I love it here. I love it here.
You like that, don't you? You were never so high. Not long now. Hold tight.
Wells was a man out of his time in so many ways. He had these incredible visions of the future, which the further we get away from his period, the closer they seem to become to the reality. He's a seer in many ways.
This sort of strange prediction, if you like, that comes about in the story of how and where the human race ends up, and this sort of sense of foreboding that the time traveller, or Wells, had at his own time when he wrote the book, and the reasons for him writing the book, this sort of cautionary tale of what happens to humanity should it not be aware of certain temptations and certain pitfalls that it may fall into when it sort of is experiencing a change in age from the rural to the industrial age. It's very interesting. It's very contemporary too. We seem to be worried a great deal now about what our current technology is doing to us as a race, as a species, and I think that's very much the question that Wells was asking when he formulated this story.
He means, I suppose, flights of fancy and extraordinary imagination and increasingly amazing predictions that seem to be coming true, for better or worse. But yeah, a very important man, I think.
What he is exploring are sort of timeless questions. And although the political landscape has changed from when he was writing, and he is a product of his time for sure, there's all kinds of interesting arguments about when he was writing about studying genetics and what the future. There were all kinds of odd beliefs at the time, sort of pseudoscience, and that sort of plays into it. So he's definitely a product of his time, but it is also very timeless in as far as it has that aspect of wonder about it, about the future, and about our direction, and helps us to understand what we should be doing in the present by understanding what the possible mistakes of the future are. So I think that although a product of his own time, there's definitely a lot of value that we can take from the works now.
He paints sort of wonderful pictures which are still very relevant. I mean, it's been said many times before, but he really was a prophet. You know, there are many parallels in this story to the modern day. So it's nice to delve back into this world again.
The worlds he creates are so complete and so well populated, but also there's a very human core at the centre that we can all relate to. So, I mean, the fantasy element is extraordinary and captivating, but it's really about how that impinges on human experience.
There is so much now that we probably forget how influential and how much of a sort of how new a lot of what he was doing was. I think he must have influenced the genre in a very, very significant way. And I think, you know, from writers like Isaac Asimov or, you know, all kinds of things, that he's been a huge influence.
Oh, now there's a thought. You could jump back to verify the accounts in the history books. The Battle of Hastings, an eyewitness account, a true record.
Oh, yes, and you could take a camera, a portrait of Henry VIII, 6 portraits, one with each wife.
And then there's the future. One might invest all one's money and leave it to accumulate interest and then hurry ahead to collect the bounty immediately.
Or discover a society built on a strictly communistic basis.
Oh, you'd get full marks for that.
Very good.
It was the forerunner of thinking about time and about time travel. And there are many things in this, the idea of changing the future and, you know, do you have the right to do that? That Doctor Who, for example, of course, has developed so massively. But I think it must come from there, mustn't it, in some ways? And he was a great precursor, a great thinker in his writing. And I mean, the fact that we're recording this now and it's still a really powerful story just shows how well conceived it is. And so that's clearly been massively influential, I think.
A few years back I did a documentary about humankind's obsession with being the last person on Earth. And most of these events seem to coincide with some kind of end-of-world theory, and then it's either a flood or some massive act of nature, or indeed another race coming to take over the Earth. Wells was the only one that really foresaw, for my mind, that humans would be their own destruction. And it's becoming horribly prescient. But you look at what he writes about in The Time Machine, and you see how he envisages a world that gets warmer, and where nature finally overgrows, but there's a massive schism between those who make and those who consume. And the gap is becoming ever clearer.
I thank you for listening, Bertie, but I cannot expect you to believe it.
Oh, come along now.
Take it as a lie instead, or a prophecy. Say I dreamed it in the workshop. Consider that I have been speculating upon the destinies of our human race until I have hatched this fiction. You can treat my insistence of its truth as a mere stroke of art to enhance its interest.
It's been great fun. I must say I haven't really felt that I've been carrying a particular weight myself, because the company's been so great and the story seems so evenly spread in terms of character that it certainly felt like a collaborative effort. It's a thrill to sort of to work in such a concentrated way. I did a similar thing with the radio version of Brideshead a while ago, where I played Charles Ryder, and I was sort of literally in the booth for 2 weeks. I can't remember seeing daylight. But it has its own peculiar kind of intensity, and I think it certainly helps a project and a character like this, who himself must have been locked away in a room for weeks on it, trying to perfect what he was creating. And that's sort of what we've all been doing for the past 48 hours, it seems.
It reminds me of the magic of radio, actually, because you can create any landscape you like. And what the writing in this instance does is it does invite you in. It's pictorial, it's full of imagination, and, you know, it starts off, I think, quite obliquely too. So it sort of invites you in and you don't quite know where you are. And I hope when you sit down at home, as it becomes clearer with you're sitting home, maybe you've got your eyes shut, it'll paint a rather beautiful picture of this world, this mysterious and dark world that he goes to.